They used to joke that Rusty was more furniture than dog. At 15 years old, his legs wobbled, his joints cracked, and most days he'd just lay by the window watching snow drift past the glass. The kids would toss him a treat now and then, ruffle his thinning golden fur, and say, "Good boy," like a habit. No one expected much from him anymore. He had earned his rest. But that night, the coldest night of the year, when the space heater in the living room shorted out and flames began to lick up the walls, it wasn't the smoke alarm that stirred first. It was Rusty. The fire crept silently. The house moaned under the heat. And upstairs, the family slept on, unaware of the danger building below them. Rusty stood. He hadn't climbed the stairs in years. His legs buckled, his breath came in gasps, but still, he climbed, one slow step at a time, through the smoke, through the pain. And when he reached the top, he barked louder than he had in years. And that bark, that single, desperate cry, shattered the silence. It saved them all. But Rusty wouldn't be the one walking out. Rusty had once been a blur of golden fur and energy, the kind of dog that made people at the park stop and smile. Kids loved him. Strangers trusted him instantly. When the Dawsons first brought him home, he'd been nothing short of a whirlwind. A tiny puppy with oversized paws, crashing into walls, skidding on kitchen tiles, leaping straight into Mark's lap whether he was ready or not. Back then, Rusty had seemed invincible. But time doesn't bargain, not even with the best of them. Now at 15, Rusty moved slowly. His legs trembled when he stood. His walks, once daily highlights, had become cautious shuffles across the backyard. He didn't chase tennis balls anymore. He just watched them roll past. Sometimes he'd try, rising halfway before sighing and settling back down. His once glossy coat had dulled, and his breath carried the tired rhythm of age. Even his bark, once sharp and eager, had become a raspy echo of itself. Still, he was loved. Emily always filled his bowl first in the morning, gently tapping the side to let him know it was there. His hearing wasn't what it used to be. Mark never left for work without rubbing the soft patch behind his ears. And the kids, Lily and Sam, still made it a point to hug him each night, even if they were more interested these days in tablets and toys. Rusty had become part of the background, like a favorite old chair or a ticking clock. Always there, always comforting. That winter had been unusually harsh. Snow piled high on the edges of their driveway, and the chills seeped into every room of their modest two-story home. Emily kept extra blankets on the couch. Mark had installed new weather stripping on the windows. And in the living room, they set up a small space heater, something to keep the downstairs warm for Rusty, who preferred the floor to his bed lately. It was old but reliable, or so they thought. On the night it happened, nothing fell out of place. Dinner was simple, grilled cheese and tomato soup. Sam had drawn a crooked snowman in crayon and proudly taped it to the fridge. Lily was reading on the couch, half watching a cartoon in the background. Rusty lay curled in his usual spot near the heater, his head resting on his paws, eyes half closed, just breathing in the soft hum of family. Mark yawned and stretched. "Early bedtime tonight," he said. "Storm's supposed to hit after midnight. Think we'll lose power?" Emily asked. "Doubt it, but I'll grab candles just in case." They went through their routines, pajamas, teeth brushing, bedtime stories. Rusty didn't follow them up the stairs. He hadn't for over a year now. His hips couldn't take it. Instead, he stayed downstairs, as he always did, wrapped in the silence of his own world. Emily came down one last time to check on him. She crouched beside him, brushing a hand over his soft ears. "You're such a good boy," she whispered. "Sleep tight, Rusty." He blinked at her, tail thumping faintly. Then she turned out the light. Upstairs, the wind howled. It rattled the windows, made the trees sway like giants outside the house. But inside, the heat purred gently, and the family slept, Lily clutching her stuffed fox, Sam snoring softly with one leg dangling off the bed. Rusty didn't sleep. Not really. Old dogs rarely did. Their nights were often half-waking, filled with memories and aches. Tonight, something tugged at him. A scent. A shift. The air. It wasn't right. His nose twitched. Smoke. At first, it was faint. Barely there. A thread in the stillness. But then came the pop. The sharp snap of metal, followed by the flicker of orange light across the far wall. The space heater. Rusty lifted his head slowly. His body protested. Every bone ached, every muscle tight. But that smell, it was growing. The corner of the rug nearest the heater had begun to smolder. The cord sparked again. Within seconds, the tiny flame danced like a whisper, climbing fibers, stretching toward the couch. Rusty stood. His legs wobbled beneath him, hips shaking. But he took a step, then another. The fire moved fast. Faster than he remembered from the time Mark had burned toast and filled the kitchen with smoke. This wasn't that. This was alive. He barked. The sound was weak, hoarse, barely enough to echo through the room. Upstairs, no one stirred. He barked again, louder this time. Smoke filled his lungs. He coughed, stumbled, but the stairs stood ahead, steep and daunting. He hadn't climbed them in years. The last time he'd tried, he'd fallen halfway and yelped so loud Lily had cried. Since then, they'd kept a baby gate at the bottom to keep him from trying. Tonight, it was open, as if someone had forgotten. Or maybe fate had remembered. Rusty placed one paw on the bottom step, then another. The heat behind him was growing. The fire now, crackling, racing up the rug, licking at the edge of the couch. Step by trembling step, he climbed. 12 stairs. It felt like 12 mountains. He paused halfway, wheezing. His nails scraped the wood. His body screamed at him to stop. But the scent of smoke had reached the top now, and still no one woke. He pushed on. When he reached the landing, he turned to the left, toward the bedrooms. Another bark. Croaked. Desperate. Then he nudged Lily's door open with his nose. Inside, she lay still, curled in blankets, lips parted softly as she breathed in the smoky air. The alarm hadn't gone off. The batteries. Mark had meant to change them weeks ago. Rusty barked again, louder this time, urgent and raw. Lily stirred, coughed, then sat up confused, eyes wide. Rusty? Another bark. This one woke Emily. Then Mark. Within seconds, chaos erupted. Doors flung open. The smell hit them like a wall. Mark shouted orders. Get the kids. Get outside. Emily grabbed Sam, who was sobbing from the sudden rush. They didn't think. They didn't hesitate. And they never saw Rusty collapse at the end of the hallway. He didn't cry out. He just laid down, gently, like he was resting. By the time Mark turned back, carrying Lily down the stairs, flames were pouring from the living room. The smoke was thick, black, choking. The walls groaned. Rusty was gone from view. And then the front door slammed open, and they were out. Into the snow, into the dark, gasping, coughing, shivering. Safe. Because of him. The cold bit through their pajamas the moment they stepped outside. Snow soaked their socks. Lily clung to Mark's neck, coughing into his shoulder, while Emily held Sam tightly, whispering, "It's okay. It's okay, baby," though her own teeth were chattering. Behind them, the house crackled and hissed like it was alive. Flames curled through the broken front windows, casting long shadows across the lawn. The night sky, which had been so still just moments ago, was now glowing orange at the edges. But none of them were looking at the fire. They were looking at the house. Rusty, Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. Mark's eyes scanned the smoke-filled doorway. He was upstairs, he said slowly, like the words were too heavy to carry. "No," Lily gasped, wriggling free. "He was the one who woke me up. He barked. He got us out. He came up the stairs." Emily's breath caught. Then he didn't make it back down. Mark turned to the kids. "Stay with Mom. Stay right here." He took one step forward, then another. But before he could reach the porch, a loud bang came from inside, something collapsing, and the fire surged forward, roaring, alive and angry. "Mark!" Emily screamed. He stopped. His hand had been reaching for the doorknob. It was glowing red. Sirens wailed in the distance. First one, then another, growing louder with every heartbeat. Lights danced across the snow as a fire engine came around the corner, followed by a second truck and an ambulance. Within moments, the lawn was crowded with firefighters. Commands flew through the air, rapid and practiced. Hoses unfurled. Water blasted into the flames. Mark tried to shout something, anything, but one of the firefighters, a woman in full gear, grabbed his shoulder and pulled him back. "Is anyone still inside?" "Our dog," Lily yelled. "He saved us. He's still in there." The woman turned to her team. "We've got a canine inside, elderly, possibly unconscious. Let's move." The firefighters entered through the back, the only door not completely swallowed by flame. Smoke poured out behind them. Emily dropped to her knees in the snow. Sam was crying now, his little face buried in her chest. Lily stood frozen, staring at the house like she could will it to stop burning. Minutes passed. Each one felt like a lifetime. Rusty didn't dream anymore, at least not like he used to, but somewhere in the haze, he felt warmth. Not the fire's heat, something else. The warmth of Lily's laugh. The feeling of Mark's strong hands lifting him into the car. The sound of Sam's tiny feet running through the hallway. Emily humming in the kitchen. It was all there, swirling in the darkness. And then something cut through it. A sharp beam of light. Shouting. The creak of boots on burnwood. "He's here." Voices. Real ones. Careful, he's breathing. Barely. And then he was lifted. Something strong wrapped around him. The air rushed colder. He was moving, floating. Then everything went dark again. Outside, the firefighters emerged from the smoke with a blackened, limp figure in their arms. Emily gasped. Lily cried out, "Rusty." They laid him gently in the snow. His fur was scorched, his breathing shallow. One paw was burned. His muzzle was covered in soot, and his eyes, usually so full of life, even in his old age, were barely open. A paramedic knelt beside him. "He's alive," she said softly, "but he needs help. Fast." "We'll take him," Mark said immediately. "Where will we do?" "There's an emergency vet open in Lakeshore, 20 minutes from here." Mark didn't wait for more instructions. He took off his coat, wrapped it around Rusty's trembling body, and scooped him up like a child. Emily opened the minivan, brushing glass off the seat. They left in a blur of headlights and tears, smoke still curling into the sky behind them as the fire trucks continued their battle with the blaze. The clinic was bright and sterile, the kind of place built for emergencies, not comfort. A young vet tech met them at the door and rushed Rusty into the back before they could even speak. Lily tried to follow, but Emily held her close. "We'll wait here," she said gently. The waiting room was too quiet. A fish tank bubbled in the corner. Holiday decorations hung awkwardly from the ceiling, out of place like smiles at a funeral. Mark paced. Emily stared at her hands. Sam had finally fallen asleep in a chair, curled up under Mark's coat. Lily sat rigid, eyes never leaving the hallway Rusty had disappeared into. A nurse came out 20 minutes later, a clipboard in hand. "He's stable. For now," she said. "He's suffering from severe smoke inhalation, second-degree burns on his paws, and he's extremely dehydrated. We've got him on oxygen and fluids." "But," she paused. "But what?" Mark asked. The nurse's face softened. "He's very old. His heart is weak. His body's been through more than it should have survived. We'll do everything we can, but it's up to him now." Emily nodded, eyes wet. "Can we see him? Just one at a time for now." Lily stood immediately. "Please," she said. "I need to." The room was small, quiet, and filled with soft beeping. Rusty lay on a padded table, an oxygen tube resting just beneath his nose. His fur had been gently cleaned, his burns treated and bandaged. His chest rose and fell barely. Lily stepped in slowly. "Hi," she whispered. She pulled a chair up beside him, her hands trembling. "You saved us, Rusty. You came upstairs. You barked, and I woke up. You made me get up." His ear twitched. Lily smiled through her tears. "You always were the best boy." She reached out, gently touched his paw, and for a moment, just a flicker, his tail moved. Once, then stillness again. But it was enough. Enough for hope to take root. The hospital room where Rusty lay was warm and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos that had erupted just hours ago. Machines whispered. Tubes ran from bags into his frail body. The monitor beeped softly, rhythmically, a sound that seemed both comforting and terrifying. Lily hadn't moved from his side. She sat with her arms folded on the edge of the table, chin resting just inches from Rusty's bandaged paw. She whispered to him sometimes, stories of their walks to the lake, how he used to tug on his leash to chase squirrels, how he once stole her entire peanut butter sandwich and ate it in one bite. Rusty didn't move, but he was breathing. That was something. Out in the waiting room, Emily and Mark sat in silence. Sam, still asleep under a thin blanket, hadn't stirred since they'd arrived. The adrenaline had drained from their bodies, replaced now by a different kind of exhaustion. The weight of what had almost happened, and what still might. They said we're lucky, Emily murmured, her voice hoarse. The fire didn't reach the stairs. If it had, if Rusty had waited another minute. Mark nodded slowly, rubbing his eyes. He didn't wait. He knew. Somehow he knew. Emily's voice cracked. He saved us. Mark didn't reply. Because what could he say? Rusty had done more than save them from a fire. He'd reminded them of something they hadn't said in a while. Maybe hadn't even realized they'd forgotten. They loved him. Deeply. Fiercely. And they'd taken his presence for granted. They never meant to, of course. But life had a way of moving too fast. Bills, school, work, dishes, errands. Rusty had just faded into the edges. Quiet. Steady. Always there. Until tonight. Now he was all they could think about. The vet returned just after 3 a.m. Dr. Reese was in her 40s, with tired eyes and soot still clinging to her jacket. She had clearly rushed from somewhere, yet her voice was soft, almost maternal. He's a fighter, she said, sliding into the seat next to Emily. Most dogs his age wouldn't have made it out of that house alive, let alone climbed stairs through smoke. Is he going to make it? Mark asked, his voice flat. The doctor hesitated. I wish I could say for sure. His oxygen levels are stable for now, and we're treating the burns. But his heart is weak. His body's exhausted. It's hour by hour. Emily blinked back tears. Can we stay with him? As long as you need. He might not be aware of everything right now, but dogs like Rusty, they feel presence. They know who's with them. Mark nodded. We're not leaving. By dawn, snow had begun to fall again outside. The storm had quieted. A blanket of white covered the parking lot, the world hushed beneath it. Inside the clinic, the Dawsons had gathered around Rusty's bed. Emily sat next to Lily, gently stroking Rusty's side. Mark stood behind them, a hand on each of their shoulders. Even Sam had woken and, wordlessly, climbed into Emily's lap, watching Rusty with wide, uncertain eyes. I remember the day we brought him home, Mark said suddenly, breaking the silence. He was the smallest pup in the litter, but he ran straight at me, knocked over my coffee, peed on my shoe. Lily smiled through her tears. And you still picked him. He picked us, Emily said quietly. They all fell quiet again, each lost in their own memories. That summer when Lily had broken her arm, Rusty hadn't left her side for 3 days. The time Sam had his first nightmare, and Rusty crawled into bed with him like he understood exactly what was needed. The way he'd always waited by the door at 5 p.m., like he could sense Mark's car before it even pulled into the driveway. He'd been more than a pet. He'd been part of them. And now, he lay still, his chest rising and falling in gentle rhythm, like he was waiting for permission to stay or to go. Lily leaned closer, her voice soft. Rusty, remember your blue ball? The one with the squeaker? We'll find it, okay? When you're better. We'll go to the park again. You can just watch this time if you want. You don't have to chase it. Rusty's ear flicked. Emily smiled through the tears. He heard you. They stayed like that all morning, talking to him, telling stories, whispering thank yous. Mark called his parents and explained what happened. They offered their spare bedroom. Emily's sister texted, "Tell Rusty we love him." Lily's teacher emailed saying they'd heard about the fire and were putting together a box of supplies. The world outside the clinic was already moving on, but the Dawsons were suspended in a single moment. One heartbeat, one breath, waiting. At noon, Dr. Reese came back in. She checked the monitors, adjusted the oxygen, listened to Rusty's heart. "He's stable," she said. "We're not out of the woods, but he's holding on." Mark swallowed. "What happens next?" "We keep him comfortable. Let the meds work. It'll be a slow climb if he makes it through today. But he's showing signs of response." "That's more than I expected." Emily brushed a hand through Rusty's fur. "He's always been stubborn." Dr. Reese smiled. "That kind of stubborn might save him." As the day wore on, the clinic allowed them to bring in warm food. The staff lit a small plug-in heater near the room. Not too close, just enough to keep the air cozy. Emily fetched Lily's fox toy from the car. Mark bought Rusty a soft blanket from the gift bin in the lobby. Sam, solemn and serious, made a get-well-soon card on a clipboard with crayons the nurse gave him. Rusty didn't move much, but when they brought in the blanket and laid it over him, he sighed. A deep, slow, grateful sound. Emily looked up. "Did you hear that?" Lily was already smiling. "He likes it." Night crept in again, quiet and slow. The second night without home, without normal. Mark took Sam into the hallway to try and get him to sleep. Emily leaned her head on the edge of the bed, whispering soft nothings to the dog who had once guarded their children like a soldier. Lily sat beside her, clutching Rusty's paw gently in both hands. "I don't want him to go," she said. Emily looked at her, eyes filled with love and sorrow. "I know, sweetheart. I don't either. Do you think he's staying for us?" Emily hesitated, then nodded. "Maybe. He's always put us first." Lily glanced down at Rusty. "Then maybe it's time we tell him. He doesn't have to." Emily leaned in close, her lips by Rusty's ear. "You don't have to fight anymore, baby," she whispered. "You did your job. You saved us. If we're tired, it's okay." A long breath escaped from Rusty's nose. Lily whispered, "We'll always love you." Then she laid her head on his side, and for the first time in 24 hours, they rested. Rusty's chest continued to rise and fall. Steady, quiet, still holding on. It was just after midnight when Mark returned from the hospital hallway, gently closing the door behind him. Sam had finally fallen asleep on a stretcher the nurses had wheeled in for them. Mark rubbed his eyes, then leaned against the wall with a deep sigh. Rusty was still breathing, shallow, quiet, but steady. His body hadn't moved much since the previous night, but there was a calm to the way he lay now. The pain meds were working. The burns were being treated. The oxygen helped. He was no longer locked in that frantic edge between life and death, but he wasn't out of danger either, just floating in between. Emily sat by his side, head bowed, brushing a warm cloth over his paw where the fur had been singed away. Lily was curled up in the corner chair with her sketch pad, drawing quietly. Her brow was furrowed in concentration. Mark noticed the card Sam had made earlier, a blue dog drawn in crayon with a giant heart next to it, now tucked into the corner of Rusty's bed. No one was crying anymore. The tears had come and gone. Now there was only reflection, stillness, and the kind of raw emotional clarity that only arrives when something precious hangs by a thread. "You know," Mark said softly, "I've written a lot of things in my life. Papers, emails, wedding vows, but I've never written a letter to a dog." Emily looked up. "I thought about that earlier. All the things I've never said to him. All the things I thought he just knew. He probably did. But maybe it's not about him knowing." She paused. "Maybe it's about us needing to say it." Lily looked up from her sketch pad. "Can we really write him a letter?" "Why not?" Mark said, stepping closer. "It doesn't have to be read. It just has to be said." Emily smiled faintly. "Let's do it." Mark found a notebook in his bag, the same one he kept in the car for grocery lists and errands. He tore out a clean page, sat at the tiny fold-out table, and uncapped a pen. The three of them sat in silence for a few moments. Then, slowly, Mark began to write. "Dear Rusty, we don't even know where to start. Maybe with thank you. Thank you for every bark that warned us something was wrong. For every wag of your tail that made a bad day better. For every time you sat beside us and didn't need to say anything. Just being there was enough. We remember the day we met you. You were wild and clumsy and too curious for your own good. You chewed through the couch cushion before we even got your name tag engraved. We knew you were trouble, but the kind we wanted in our lives. You grew up with us. You watched us fall in love, build a home, have kids. You were always there. Every birthday, every scraped knee, every backyard barbecue, every stormy night, every snow day. And tonight, you didn't hesitate. You gave everything. You saved us. And we didn't even hear you cry. We're so sorry if we ever made you feel forgotten. You were never just a pet. You were family. You still are. Whatever happens next, whether you stay or go, we want you to know you were the best dog, our best friend, our protector, our heart. Always. Love, your family. Mark stopped writing and wiped his eyes. He passed the letter to Emily, who read it in silence, then nodded and placed it gently next to Rusty's chest. His breathing hadn't changed, but something in the room felt different. Lighter, softer, like a weight had lifted. Lily got up and tiptoed over with her sketch pad. "Can I show him?" She held it up. A pencil drawing of Rusty, just as he used to be, strong, healthy, chasing a butterfly through a field. In the corner, she'd drawn all four of them, Lily, Sam, Mom, and Dad, standing beneath a tree, waving. Rusty was running toward them. "I drew him in heaven," she whispered. Mark knelt beside her. "Hey, we're not there yet. Okay?" "I know," she said, "but just in case he's dreaming." At around 3 a.m., Dr. Reese returned. She checked his vitals again, her expression more relaxed this time. "He's improving," she said quietly. "Still slow, still fragile. But his numbers are moving in the right direction." Emily let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Is it okay to hope now?" she asked. The vet smiled gently. "I think it's okay to hope." They decided to stay the night again. The clinic staff brought in more blankets. One nurse even brought hot cocoa from the break room. The Dawsons stayed close. Not because they had to, but because they didn't want to be anywhere else. Rusty's world had always been them. Now their world was him. At one point near dawn, as the snowstorm gave way to the soft gray light of morning, something small happened. Something quiet. Rusty shifted. Not much. Just a slight turn of his head. A soft sigh. His nose twitched. His ears lifted. Not fully, but just enough to notice. Lily leaned forward. "Rusty?" His eyes fluttered open. Not wide. Not all the way. But they opened. And for one beautiful, weightless second, he looked at her. Right at her. Lily gasped. "Mom. Dad. He looked at me." Emily turned, hand flying her mouth. Mark stood frozen. Rusty's eyes lingered, just long enough, and then slowly closed again. But he was still breathing, still here. And now they knew. So was he. Rusty's recovery was not a miracle. It wasn't dramatic or fast or sudden. It was slow, painfully slow. Each hour was a quiet battle fought beneath warm blankets and hushed voices. Some mornings, he didn't move at all. Others, he'd twitch a paw or shift his head just slightly in response to a familiar voice. His burns began to heal in layers, the rawness fading into scarred pink skin beneath carefully trimmed fur. The oxygen stayed on, his force stayed in, but his will, that stayed too. After 5 days, they moved him from the ICU to a recovery room with softer lighting and a larger bed. The vet techs wheeled in a low, padded mat and laid Rusty on his side with gentle hands. There were no more machines, no more emergency alarms, just quiet and hope. Emily had returned to work part-time. She looked tired, older somehow, like grief had brushed its hand across her face but hadn't fully claimed it. Mark worked from the clinic's waiting room with his laptop balanced on his knees, checking in between emails and visiting Rusty every hour. Lily and Sam had started going back to school. Their classmates asked a lot of questions. Most didn't understand what it meant to lose a home, but they all understood one thing. Rusty was a hero. "Is he going to be in the newspaper?" One boy asked. "He should be," Lily said proudly. "He saved us." Even the fire chief said so. And he had. Every firefighter who had arrived at the Dawson house remembered the name Rusty, the old dog who refused to let his family die in their sleep. The Red Cross found the Dawsons temporary housing, a small rental unit across town with 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, and a tiny fenced backyard. It wasn't much, but it was warm, and it was safe. The first thing Mark brought into the living room was Rusty's old food bowl. The second was his bed, now a little thinner, a little worn, still smelling faintly of smoke even after a few washes. They set it by the sliding glass door where sunlight spilled across the rug every morning. A space just for him, just in case. 2 weeks after the fire, Rusty came home. They carried him gently in a blanket, easing him into his bed like a fragile memory. He didn't bark, he didn't wag, but he blinked slowly as if taking inventory. New walls, new smells, the same people. And that was enough. The first few nights were hard. He cried out once in his sleep, not loudly, but enough to make Lily wake up and crawl from her bed into the living room to lie beside him. She stayed there until morning, her tiny hand on his paw. Sometimes when the wind howled outside, he'd lift his head, as if remembering, as if searching. Trauma doesn't always come with obvious scars, but healing did come. One evening, as the family sat around the dinner table eating soup from mismatched bowls, Rusty did something he hadn't done since the night of the fire. He stood up, slowly, awkwardly. He pushed himself on his trembling legs, walked 3 careful steps toward Emily, and sat beside her chair. Silence fell. Even Sam stopped chewing. Mark smiled. "Hey, old man." Rusty looked up, and then, for the first time in weeks, his tail gave a small, flickering wag. It was barely more than a twitch, but it sent Emily into tears. From that moment on, he made his comeback 1 paw at a time, each day a little further across the rug, a little more water in his bowl, a few bites of chicken, a weak bark at the mailman. The smallest things felt like victories. The vet called it a miracle. Mark called it Rusty. Lily drew a picture the day Rusty took his first steps outside. In it, he stood in the snow with his bandaged paws, head raised, tail high. Above him, she wrote in big block letters, "He's back." They hung it on the fridge with the only surviving magnet from the old house, the one shaped like a dog bone that read "Forever Loved." The community rallied too. Neighbors dropped off blankets and dog treats. A local shelter started a GoFundMe to help with Rusty's medical costs. Even a local newspaper ran a feature story titled "Old Dog, Brave Heart: How One Golden Retriever Saved a Family." The photo they used was of Rusty lying beside Lily in the clinic, her head resting gently on his chest. That image said more than words ever could. One Saturday, about a month after the fire, Emily found a small package on the doorstep. Inside was a black velvet box, and inside that, a custom-made dog tag. Engraved on one side, "Rusty, the dog who saved us." On the back, "We're safe because you weren't." No note, no return address, just love. They clipped it onto his collar that night. Rusty didn't seem to notice, but maybe he did, because as they all sat together in their tiny new living room, watching a movie on an old laptop, Rusty curled up in his bed and let out the deepest, most content sigh any of them had ever heard. That night, for the first time in over a month, they all slept through the night. No nightmares, no coughing, no fire alarms, just the soft rhythm of breath and the knowledge that the one who had saved them was still here. Spring came late that year. The snow melted in patches, retreating reluctantly from rooftops and sidewalks. Small buds bloomed on trees like a whisper of life returning. And with each warming day, the Dawsons found themselves breathing just a little easier. The fire was behind them now, physically at least. They had settled into their temporary home. Insurance claims were slowly moving. A contractor had already begun drafting plans to rebuild their house. Friends brought hand-me-down furniture, and Emily found a set of dog-themed curtains at a thrift store that made Lily laugh out loud. Bit by bit, they were putting their lives back together. But they all knew The true glue holding everything in place was Rusty. He wasn't the same as before. That much was clear. His walk was stiff. His bark, when it came, was barely audible. He slept more than ever, sometimes not moving for hours. But he was still here. He followed Lily to the door every morning, sitting quietly as she kissed his head goodbye before heading to school. He waited by Emily's feet as she cooked dinner, even though the most he ever got was a little boiled chicken in his bowl. He dozed beside Mark during quiet evenings, his head resting on a pillow from the old couch, the only piece of furniture they'd managed to salvage from the fire. And every night, without fail, he crawled the few steps to Sam's room, waiting until he was asleep before slowly returning to his bed. He never climbed the stairs again, but he never had to. They had come to him. One Saturday afternoon, nearly 3 months after the fire, the Dawsons gathered in a park just outside town. It wasn't planned, not really. The day was too beautiful to stay indoors. The sun glowed soft and golden, casting long, gentle shadows across the grass. The breeze smelled like fresh earth and lilacs. Rusty was with them, curled on a thick blanket beneath the oak tree. His fur had grown back in most places. The burns were now soft scars beneath a coat of pale gold. His eyes were a little cloudier, his breath slower, but he looked peaceful, content. Sam ran in circles with a plastic glider, laughing. Emily sat reading beside Mark, who watched the kids with a quiet smile. Lily sat next to Rusty, sketching in her notepad, as she had nearly every day since the hospital. She was older now, somehow, not in years, but in presence. Grief and love had etched something deep into her. She saw the world differently. She looked at Rusty now not as a pet, but as someone who had chosen her. "Hey," she whispered, closing her sketchbook. Rusty's eyes fluttered open. He gave a tiny thump of his tail on the blanket. "I've been drawing you again. Want to see?" She turned the page. It was him, standing at the top of the stairs, that moment when he had reached the family's bedrooms through the smoke. But in her drawing, he was bigger than life. Heroic, strong, and behind him, flames, fading into the shadows. "You were brave," she said softly. "You were hurting, but you still saved us." Rusty didn't move, but his eyes held hers. She felt something settle inside her. "I think you stayed because you weren't ready to let go, and maybe because you knew we weren't either." Her voice cracked. "But it's okay if you're tired. I get it now." Lily leaned down, resting her forehead gently against his. "You don't have to worry anymore. We're okay now." And then, almost imperceptibly, she felt it, a soft nudge of his nose, a breath, and the tiniest lick on her cheek. That was all, but she knew what it meant. That night, back at the rental house, Rusty didn't get up to follow anyone. He stayed in his bed by the sliding glass door, watching the moonlight paint silver shapes on the carpet. The family moved gently around him. Dinner, bedtime, soft goodnights. Lily was the last to kneel by his side. She didn't say much. She just kissed his head and whispered, "I love you." And for the first time since the fire, Rusty didn't shift in his sleep. In the morning, he was gone. They found him exactly where they'd left him. Eyes closed, face peaceful, his body curled like he'd drifted into the deepest dream and simply stayed. Emily sat beside him first, then Mark, then the kids. No one said anything for a long time. Because what could be said? How do you thank someone who gave you more time and then used theirs to do it? They buried him beneath the oak tree at the park, the same place he had last looked at peace. Mark built a small wooden marker, and Lily painted it with blue flowers and Rusty's name in golden letters. They didn't need a big service. He didn't want noise, just love, and maybe a breeze in the grass. Months passed. The new house was slowly rising from its foundation. Lily started middle school. Sam got his first loose tooth. The world kept turning, but there wasn't a day that went by that they didn't feel him. In the evenings, Emily would still catch herself reaching for a second bowl before dinner. Mark would sometimes feel something press against his leg under the table, only to find nothing there. And Lily? She kept drawing him, over and over, sometimes as a puppy, sometimes as the hero at the top of the stairs. But one day she drew something new, Rusty lying beneath the oak tree, tail wagging in the breeze. But in the drawing, he wasn't alone. Behind him were paw prints, dozens of them, leading off into the clouds. She didn't cry when she finished it. She just smiled, because she knew Rusty had given everything he had, and somehow, in the end, he'd still left them with more.
Dogs truly are the most loyal companions in our lives. What did you think of this heartwarming story? Let us know in the comments. Like the video and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for daily emotional dog stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Click here to watch the next story of love, loyalty, and the incredible bond we share with our paw-some friends.